Brown baby, brown baby, as you grow up, I want you to drink from the plenty cup.
Good evening, everyone. I am Vivienne Benesch, producing artistic director of PlayMakers Repertory Company, and welcome to our second episode of Virtually Viv. In this series, I sit down virtually with esteemed theater artists from the Triangle and around the nation and engage in conversations with amazing people about our stories, past, present, and most important, into the future. As with all our events, there's a special treat in getting to experience tonight live. Although you won't be able to speak directly, the chat button at the bottom of your screen is a great tool to write in any questions you may have. You can do this at any point during our conversation. I promise it won't interrupt us. Our fabulous Associate Director of Marketing, Rosalie Preston, is standing by, keeping an eye on the chat, and she'll pass on some of your questions. I'm sure some of you that have already had a chance to watch his performance in the talk will have questions not in short supply for our guest tonight. Speaking of which, of whom, get my grammar right. Our guest tonight is a world-class performer, storyteller, motivator, speaker, and comedian. As of just last month, he holds a new PhD in Communications and Performance Studies from our very own UNC Chapel Hill. After serving our nation as a US Air Force officer, he has gone on to serve as a nonprofit organization director, university admissions counselor, award-winning pharmaceutical salesman, college communications instructor, and a church youth pastor. And as a lover of theater and performance, he's acted professionally on stage and in television for over 20 years. He is also a writer and a director of live theater, as well as the creator and co-host of Crossover, a radio show on WIDU in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And as a professional storyteller, he has performed with the National Association of Black Storytellers, the Black Storytellers Alliance, as well as schools, businesses, and civic organizations. His research work is based upon developing trauma-informed performance-based interventions to empower underserved youth to counter the school-to-prison pipeline. We at PlayMakers are proud to be presenting a recording that hopefully many of you have seen of Sonny's one-man show, The Talk. It draws on the voices of ancestors, elders, youths, and intellectuals to engage in the difficult conversations that he and so many other African-American parents in particular must have with their children as they prepare them to survive and thrive in a divided America. I have to thank Street Signs and Bulldog Ensemble Theater for asking PlayMakers to co-present this masterpiece of modern theater. So after an introduction that could take up our entire time because he is so accomplished, please join me in welcoming the brilliant, passionate, and tireless Sonny Kelly.
Hey.
Welcome. I know, that is the joke. You've done so much that the entire half hour is going to be just your resume. So I guess my very first question, Sonny, is do you ever sleep?
Not much, not much. My most important job is being the husband of Elena Godbold Kelly and the father of Sterling and Langston Kelly. And I got to take care of that stuff first, and then I do all this other stuff you just read about. So a lot of energy drinks and caffeine. Not great for the system, kids, but it's what gets it done for me.
So there's so many things I want to know about you and your life, but let's start at the right at this moment. Like, what's happening in your life right now between the pandemic, the current Black Lives Matter uprisings, and like where are you at?
Yeah, I'm busier than ever in a good way because I'm full of purpose right now. A lot of people have asked me in light of the work that I do, hey, after George Floyd, after Breonna Taylor, after Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others, are you depressed? Are you upset? Are you angry? And I said, you know, I'm not, because I knew this stuff was happening. I'm glad it's on tape. So now we can prove to the rest of the world it's been going on. The dehumanization and criminalization of Black people, especially. So for me, that's my work. That's my wheelhouse. So it's like game on, right? It's time for me to get busy. I'm writing another piece right now. I'm performing the talk virtually and planning to perform it live on military installations, at schools, at universities. And then of course, talking to my kids and my wife and my family about digesting all of this, you know? So there's plenty to do, but it's all for me full of purpose. This is probably the most purpose-driven moment of my life.
So let's take a step back to what started the talk, the creation of the talk. And one of the many things I'm interested in also is your background. You come from so many different angles. You've experienced so many different perspectives in the work that you've done and your interests, and especially interested in sort of like how it came to the academy, you know, to getting your PhD. How did all those things sort of the confluence them that exists in what the talk is?
Wow. I think I was at intelligence training. I was an intelligence officer. I was in San Angelo, Texas, and I was moonlighting doing some community theater. And one of my acting colleagues there said, man, you are a warrior poet. You're a warrior poet. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I think that's the best way I can kind of conceptualize what I do and what my hands have been put to do. Like when I say warrior in this case, it's struggle for what's right, what's good, for equity, inclusion. And I'm always poeticizing, I'm always writing and thinking artistically and applying an aesthetic approach to whatever I do. So since I've been acting since I was a kid, that's what I know to do. I know to engage people and connect. But when I got older and I started working for Fayetteville Urban Ministry, working for universities, the military, I learned that there are a lot of battlefronts in the world where people need someone to stand up for them and with them. And so that's always been on my heart. So I've always found ways to somehow end up in front of a bunch of kids or people who feel marginalized and help them to write poetry and perform and act. Shakespeare Behind Bars, I'm a big fan of, been following their work for quite some time. And so when I got to the point of going to UNC Chapel Hill, I'd been working for Fayetteville Urban Ministry for quite some time, working for people who were underprivileged, underserved in Fayetteville. And I realized this gift of acting and writing and creativity, I've got to do more with it. More than just write grants and manage a staff and manage a budget, which I became good at, but my calling was the stage. So when I was there, I did a show called The Parchment Hour, written and directed by Mike Wiley, another great person you'll probably have on this show.
The great Mike Wiley. The
great Mike Wiley, my good. And when you watch my work, you'll see he's touched me in so many ways. I really have been influenced by Mike Wiley. And so I played Stokely Carmichael. I played Stokely Carmichael, and that was the first time I'd ever been in a play in community theater, in a play where I was playing a real person. And many of the lines I was saying were actual words that Stokely Carmichael said. And what I was talking about, racial equity, integration, true inclusion, was still a struggle that we're dealing with today. So on many fronts, I felt enlivened by this work. I've done Shakespeare, I've done classics, I've done new contemporary theater, but this was the first time in Mike Wiley's The Parchment Hour that I felt, wow, my work is actually moving towards social change, and it's fulfilling, and it's challenging and exciting, right? And so that was when I first heard about Chapel Hill and the really innovative, exciting, eclectic program that the Chapel Hill Communication Department provides and performance studies. And that's what I focused on. So I took my studies and I just kind of bent them toward justice and toward truth and struggle, especially for Black youth and youth of color and really marginalized youth in general. And so when I was doing that, I was in the midst of trying to figure that out. April 12th, 2015 happened. And that was when Freddie Gray was arrested in Baltimore, Maryland. Then April 19th, the following Sunday, he died at approximately 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm in the car with my son, taking him to school in Fayetteville, North Carolina, typical day of first grade. And we hear on the news about this Black man who died, or was killed rather, and then all of the protests and riots and looting and violence and confusion that came out of that. And I realized I've got this beautiful little boy in my back seat. He's only 7, but he's somehow got to be warned that this kind of thing could happen to him. One day he's going to be a Black man, right? And I had the talk with him, what we call the talk. About a week or two later, I was in downtown Fayetteville, and I started just thinking about the talk I had with my son, and I began weeping. I didn't realize how traumatizing it was. What was most shocking for me was I hadn't prepared for the talk. I did not have to prepare or think it through. I just went into it. It was in my DNA to tell myself, you know. And so after that, I just started writing. And then after a while, I took a class with Joseph Meagle, a wonderful professor and playwright in his own right and director. And I said, hey, here's a story called Sterling Story. It's my son's name. And it's what I wrote. It's like 8 minutes. And Joseph said, first he wept, which I love about him. And then he said, oh, babe, we got to do more with this. There's more to that. And I took his class. And I took his class twice, actually. And so over the course of 3 years, we developed The Talk.
Wow. So, okay. So I'm really curious how, again, your studies, how the sort of intellectuals that permeate through the story as well encounter to your own relationship with your son and what is at stake in that. How do those two sort of, how do they commingle for you?
Yeah, you know, Joseph always tells me not to explain it this way, but when The Talk started, it was a term paper for me. It was me just trying to figure out, why did I have to have this talk, right? Because now that I've been charged intellectually by pursuing a PhD, I'd already been a very performative person and performance-focused person. I knew that I wanted to write a story and tell a story about it, but the intellectual kind of heights that I'd come to made me think, well, there's more to this. There's theory to this. There's people like Frantz Fanon who've been theorizing epidermalization, as he calls it, how you totalize a people based upon their epidermis, right? People like Paul Gilroy, who taught me and helped me to understand this whole concept of Black suffering and how it can transcend the suffering of a local community and begin to help us have communications about a global humanism and a global struggle for justice and truth and love and inclusion and equity, all those things we're talking about now, but these folks have been talking about for decades. W.E.B. Du Bois, his notion of double consciousness. It gave me language to understand why I felt as a Black man in America, a Black veteran in America, how much I love this country was always mismatched with how much I felt this country loved me. And I always felt like I had to adjust my body. You know, I'm a performance guy, so I'm very sensitive to when I'm performing. And I noticed that when I'm around people that I can tell I'm not comfortable with my Blackness or my maleness or my Black maleness, I adjust, I smile a lot, I get eye contact. I never have my hoodie up, you know, I'm always kind of, you know, I'm over complimenting people, you know, and I realized, oh, wow, I've been adjusting like my ancestors have to this double consciousness. And then James Baldwin blew my mind. I was in a class and a friend of mine said, you know, have you read James Baldwin's letter to his nephew? Wrote it back in 1962. And he wrote a whole letter to his nephew about what it's like to be a Black boy in America. And sadly, it wasn't much different from the kind of talks I have with my sons now. Thank God we're not where we used to be, right? There's been a lot of progress, but there's still this notion of you've got to prepare yourself for the possibility of threat to your life because of how you look and who you are, right? We live with a daily precarity. And so I was able to find words like that, precarity, right? Looking at critical theory, critical race theory, understanding the intersectionality of things. And I know a lot of the stuff nowadays, I listen to a lot of the news, it's become trigger words, right? You know, intersectionality, critical race theory, and it's like, hey, look, it's good. It helps us to get at the issues. You know, I don't look at critical race theory or critical theory as something that defines my worldview, but rather it's a scalpel that helps me to cut into the work I do and understand what I'm trying to do and the issue that's there, right? What needs to be handled. So yeah,
here's just a question that I would think to ask at the end, but I'm going to ask it right now. What would you tell, like, if I were in a conversation going like, I really want to get, because everyone wants to be sort of better educated, better read right now, resources, and there's a lot of the sharing of resources going on right now, which I think is great. What for you are sort of touchstones that you might say, you know what, go to this?
You know, I would say first and foremost for me, Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, a talk given from the perspective of a super intelligent, deep diving researcher to his 15-year-old son. So it's accessible, but it's super smart and rich and helps us to understand how we got here and helps us to kind of start to navigate routes for where we're going to go. I create this binary in my writing, roots and routes, right? The roots of racism are one thing, but the routes that we're going to forge are what we do with talking the talk, right? With our performances or with our conversations and our new policies and procedures, et cetera. So Ta-Nehisi Coates, I think, helps us to get at the roots of that, but also start to consider the routes. Ibram X. Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist, wonderful piece. Also very accessible, but very smart. And it helps you to understand wow, okay, that's why I feel that way. Or wow, okay, that's why that's problematic. Like you ever had a conversation with somebody and you knew what they said was problematic and maybe bigoted or racist, not that they are, but what they said was, right? But you can't quite get at it and you can't quite articulate it. Not to attack them or to win an argument, but just to say why you feel icky about that thing. It wasn't quite right. Didn't feel right in my spirit, as we say, right?
Yeah.
And so,
and such a good writer too. Such a good writer as well.
It's enjoyable to read, right? Enjoyable to read. And then, of course, there was the Black Atlantic by Paul Gilroy. That really helped to open my mind up to this notion of suffering that's happened in the Black diaspora across the globe, and how it's been articulated through music, right? And through our understanding of art, and how we can mobilize that, not just to showcase how we've kind of created beauty for ashes as a people and how resilient we are, but also to actually move us toward a deeper understanding of suffering and how to better take care of each other as humans, right? And I'd say W.E.B. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folk, 1903, but it's still so relevant today. Not to say that history hasn't changed, but he is so smart and so sharp in helping us to understand how really people, even today, live in two different Americas. I'd say that today, those two different Americas are not just racialized, but they're very much socioeconomic worlds, right? I always have to make sure I give this disclaimer. As much as I stand with Black Lives Matter and I stand with my community, I also know that I'm a man who's got more education, more wealth. I've had both my parents together my whole life. I had a military background. I've had a lot of blessings in my life that a lot of my brothers and sisters in the African American or Black community have not had access to. So there are certain slings and arrows that I bypass, overcome, transcend, that I know a lot of my brothers and sisters are not able to do. Stop and frisk, for example. I don't live in a neighborhood where there's a lot of stop and frisk going on, but a lot of people who look like me do. Right. So there are a lot of daddies with their kids in the back seat who are getting stopped, frisked, sometimes arrested for nothing they did wrong. They just happen to look the part. What's that do to the mind of the little kid in the back seat watching their father or their mother or themselves being criminalized on a regular basis with a routine stop? That's problematic, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm looking at the chat right now and knowing just how many, but something that keeps coming up in a question is if it's okay to ask, Sonny, like, how are your sons dealing with all the news and the protests today, and how has your own talk evolved?
Yeah. There's a part in the talk that Joseph challenged me to write, because he said, okay, your son was 7 at the time. He's going to grow up. What other talks are you going to have? There are different iterations of this, right? And so there's a part in the talk that so beautifully says, you know, how do you explain to a 7-year-old his all-encompassing Blackness? And when he's 12 and his voice starts to drop and he stops being cute, or when he's 16 and his very survival may depend upon the 2 and the 10 and proper curbside etiquette, which begs a more important question. Are we allowed to want better for our children, to do better for our children? And so I've had to live with that challenge. And so I'm constantly finding new ways to ask my children what they're going through and understand their perspective, and also inform their perspectives, because I don't want to put guilt on them. I don't want to put an inferiority complex on them. I don't want them to walk in fear. Our favorite Bible scripture, one of our favorite Bible scriptures in this house, 2 Timothy 1:7, God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind, right? So I want my kids to walk that way. So I continually repeat those positive messages to them. But like I did when I was an intelligence officer, I don't send an air crew into a threatening area without giving them a sound brief on the possible threat that could hit them. Thank God, in all my years in the Air Force, I never had an air crew go into what we call a threat ring, right? Somewhere where they could be shot, that was shot at or shot down, thank God. But if they had been, I gave them all the tools they needed to know. I said, hey, there's possible ground fire here, there's reports of possible RPGs there, whatever the case may be, right? So how could I send my children into the world without this regular conversation? Now, my kids have surprised me. They're super resilient, and I'm grateful for that. I remember Sterling, when he was 10 at this time, I said, son, what do you think about the show? I don't want to jade you or take your innocence, and I don't want to at all profit off of your life. This is about you. This is my love for you. He said, no, Daddy, the show's really good. You forget your lines sometimes. You mess it up here and there. But I'm like, okay, best critic. But he says, you know what? I think it's a good show, but the talk is not necessary for me now, because people don't think that I would have access to like drugs and weapons, because I'm just a kid. And for him to think it through like that, and to be so matter of fact, Viv, like he was, like, that's what people don't understand. Black kids, they grow up in a world where they are considered the lesser by many people, and their lives are in peril in many ways, and they have to be resilient to get through this thing. And so he basically told me that he knows he'll have to have later talks later. So he's 12 now. He's going to middle school. He'll be 13 soon. His voice has not dropped yet, but he's definitely a big, solid, strong guy. And I have to warn him and tell him, hey, son, you're one of the bigger kids in your class. I need you to not only stop bullies and stand up against them because you have the girth for it, right? But I also need to make sure you never are perceived as a bully. So you watch your tone, you be gentle with everyone, and you make sure you keep your eyes up, smile, check in with people. And if you see somebody's not safe, you get away from them because they're not ready. They can't honor and treasure you as the sterling that you are. So sterling means little star, pure and thoroughly excellent. I named him on purpose, right? And so I kind of planted that resilience in him, I think, in some ways.
And you named him after one of your best friends, which I didn't know until I rewatched your show. And I was like, wait a minute, Sterling K. Brown. Oh my God, because I also went to graduate school with Sterling K. Brown at NYU.
We've known each other, which is super cool. So yeah, Sterling was one of my favorite people in college because he was so dedicated. I mean, the man loved his craft. He loved people. And I think that's one reason why he's so successful. He was just such a genuinely tender, thoughtful human being, right? And so I'm glad to be your Kevin Bacon, I guess. Or maybe he can be the Kevin Bacon. I don't know, but they were just a couple degrees.
So, okay, a couple of questions have come up. First, people would like to know about your T-shirt and
yeah, wore it on purpose. See, I told you this is a season of purpose for me. So Kurt Toftelin and the folks out there at the Luckett prison facility there in Louisville, Kentucky. Side note, home of Breonna Taylor, woman who was shot to death back in March, right? So Louisville, Kentucky is an important place for many reasons. They've been doing Shakespeare Behind Bars for a couple decades now. And what they do is they go into maximum security prisons as well as youth facilities. They go to the Audubon Youth Facility out there. I had the privilege in some of my research in 2016 to go and see what they do. And I sat with these big, strong men and these big, strong boys with the youth. And people who had been written off, many of them murderers. I mean, I'm talking serious crimes, right? And we sat there and we did Shakespeare. And I think they were doing Twelfth Night. They were doing Twelfth Night. And I was so impressed and blessed by the way the men played the females. Because they were not campy, they weren't over the top, they were just genuine and sincere and so dignified. Like this, the way that Shakespeare was able to lift up this dignity in these men who, some of whom would never get out. There were some lifers in there, right? And I felt safe. Viv, it was crazy. I'm sitting with all these dudes, right? And you know, some of them are some neo-Nazis, some of them are, you know, murderers, whatever it may be. But in that moment, on that stage, it was an equalizer. And we were all able to imagine a new possibility. And then separately, I went to the youth facility, the Audubon facility, saw a bunch of kids between 14 and 16 doing Julius Shakespeare. And I saw how they were connecting their choices in life to Brutus and to Julius Shakespeare. Like, wow, I have some power. I can be the master of my fate. And to watch them lift their heads up and like, as they're playing this character, using this language that's more sophisticated than most Americans at high school and college level have a problem with, right? These 14, 16-year-old thugs, right? At-risk kids, whatever you want to label them, right? They were in there with their, you know, their scrubs on and their socks and their flip-flops, rocking Julius Shakespeare. Yeah. I mean, come on. I mean, Julius Caesar, excuse me. Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. That to me was mind-blowing. I was like, my life is changed right now. So I wore this shirt to just remind us that theater changes lives.
Well, you know what? That's an amazing segue into the question that I've been asking, I was going to say, I've been asking every guest. You are my second ever guest.
I'm so glad.
Yes. But the question I want to ask, because it's at the center of PlayMakers' mission, at the center of our mission is that theater can have a transformative impact. And I want to know for you, what does transformation mean today? Like, what is possible? What is transformative impact, and how does theater for you play a part in that?
Yeah, I think transformation today in this super polarized space we're in now is allowing ourselves to imagine what seems impossible. When you get onto a stage, you become a character that is unlike yourself. Oftentimes a character you never could have played otherwise, never could have been. You say things you might have never had the guts, courage, agency to say, and you can imagine the possibilities. You know, Augusto Boal says that he calls it the therapeutic stage. You can kind of start to heal through some things and work through some things. He calls theater a place for revolution, right? And I love the fact that I'm going to Rent here, one of my favorite musicals, that line that says the opposite of war isn't peace, it's creation. I love the fact that the artists, this motley crew of folks who are just kind of, we never quite fit in, but we just know we love to express ourselves. The artists can lead the way to transformation, which is imagining the impossible. Because I am just crazy enough, optimistic enough, faithful enough to believe that there's some way we can find some common ground in all this and press through it and survive COVID-19 and thrive through and past racism, right? So for me, it's a matter of imagining ourselves differently so we can put down our talking points, put down our political stances, put down our sense of strong identity and that is mutually exclusive. I think it's great to love who you are, but it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive with who I am, right? I love that you're white and you're beautiful, and I love that I'm Black and I'm beautiful. And we should both be able to love that. And they're not mutually exclusive, but they actually complement each other. When we're on the stage and we're acting and we're counting to each other, we're making sure we don't upstage each other, right? We're sharing lines. We are sharing lines. We're doing iambic pentameter, that heartbeat together, right? That is connected, and that is, to me, transformative. So that's what I see as transformative from my perspective as an artist. That's my calling in this struggle.
There's so many things coming up in the chat, and we've only got, I have to keep it on time, but someone shared, which I think is lovely, that as a white person speaking to a group of Black high schoolers, they're always in a slightly stomach-tight fear of misspeaking, particularly if I'm there as the person in charge. You are so often in the reverse of that as a sort of the, like, do you have, like, how do we make safe spaces for everyone?
I'm gonna challenge that. I don't like safe spaces as much because it's become a trigger word, and a lot of people use it as well, if you're a snowflake and you can't take, we're not doing that. I don't want you to be safe. I want you to be courageous. Because if you feel like you can come to voice and you can share what you have to say, and people will hear it in a way that is loving and is witnessing and it will uphold your dignity, then you'll be courageous. So I like to create courageous spaces. So there are two sides to this. I'll go with the easy one, the one that's most accessible to me. When I work with youth who are in communities that are underserved, right? I'm an outsider on the inside, and I'm an insider on the outside in some ways, in the sense that I'm Black like most of them, but financially, socioeconomically, culturally, we come from different places. I come from California, where I was always the only Black kid in my classroom, for example, right? I'm culturally, in many ways, I'm Latinx in the sense that, like, I grew up eating raspados y elotes, like that's my culture too, right? So I go into communities where I am an insider, I look like one, but I'm an outsider in many ways. So the first thing I do is learn their names. I learn their names well. And I make sure that if I mispronounce a name, I get it over and over again. I look at that child in the eye and say, no, we're not gonna give a nickname. No, you don't let me off the hook. I will pronounce this name right because you are worth studying. I wanna be an expert in you. And guess what? You're an expert on your own life experience. So I exalt that expertise, and I want you to share in your own vernacular, your own way, your experience. So we start by writing haikus about how we feel, because it allows us to distill our feelings. Way, right? Then we go from those haikus and we go into directing other people reading our haikus. So is it okay, with your permission, is it okay if Tommy reads your haiku? Is it okay, Tommy, you ready to act this out? All right, and we stop, not, did he get the emotion right? Okay, and then now you have agency, right? And we're in this, we got skin in the game, because I'm gonna be embarrassed too. And you have to lead by putting your skin in the game. If you feel insecure, you feel like an outsider, let the kids know. If you feel like you've had some times in your life where your heart's been broken and you felt like you weren't good enough, let them know, because they feel it too. But they need you to lead by example, because they're too concerned with saving face. And when you come into a room as a leader who is maybe white or at a higher echelon sociologically, you need to humble yourself in that way and connect and let them know that they're experts. On the flip side, teaching at UNC Chapel Hill and now at Fayetteville Technical Community College, I find that my white, male, cis, hetero students oftentimes clamp up. I walk in the room, they see my face. If they look at my bio, they know I'm down with critical race theory, and they look at my show and they know that I do the talk and I want to talk about race and stuff. They're like, nope. Because they're so often, sight unseen, they're so often categorized as the bigot, the racist, the whatever you want to call it, right? The deplorable. And sadly, some people have done that to them. Let's just be honest. There are some white people who walk into a room and before they can even speak, they're shut down by people who say, well, you represent the patriarchy. You represent the oppressor. You must answer for your ancestors. So I tell my white students up front, listen, you don't have permission not to talk in this classroom. I'm gonna use my agency in this liberal space as a Black man, and my life matters, and to tell you your life matters too, and your opinion matters. Even if I don't disagree, if I don't agree with it, your opinion matters. So I challenge them to be courageous and speak out and also come to voice. Because if they come to voice, we all come to voice together.
So, okay, I'm just gonna take a little right turn off of that. I'm so curious. with some of your very best friends right now, are you in conversation with them constantly about like all these issues? Are you exhausted from the work, like when the work? And the reason that I ask that question is because one of your very best friends I know is Sterling K. Brown.
Yes, I named my son.
Sterling K. Brown. And I have been listening to some of his live, of him live on Facebook, and been insanely moved by what he has been talking about. So we thought it might be fun right now, if he is there, to have him Zoom bomb this
No, look at him.
episode.
Look at him.
Hold on.
Who's that?
Hold on. It's coming. There we go.
Brown, what's up, man?
Hi.
That's my man right there.
Viv, how are
Hello,
you?
Sterling. Hi. I feel like I've seen you a whole lot more than you've seen me recently. It's so lovely to see you face to face. Hi. Oh
It was
my God.
awesome just listening to you guys talk. Like this is like you guys are going in. Sonny always goes in. Like, this is the nature of Sonny Eugene Kelly. This is the kind of knowledge that he drops on the regular, and I'm blessed to be his friend.
So I want a little insight about the beginning of your friendship, and was it always go deep quick?
So how would you describe the beginning? Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say my first experience was with Sterling. He was an economics major, and so was I. He got smart and switched to theater quickly. I couldn't because I was Air Force ROTC, so I was like, ooh, what am I gonna do? So we seen each other in economic classes, but I remember I went to go to an audition for Joe Turner's Come and Gone at Stanford University, and it was freshman year, right? This dude comes out, gets the lead role like that. Like, I mean, it's sleeper, just comes out, everybody's like, oh, I'm not even going in, I'm done. Well, who is he? I'm done. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna try some stuff. And so I went hard, you know, put my energy on. I didn't even get cast. And I remember looking at him like, okay, he's more than just a colleague. This dude is about something. And at the time, let me just note, I had a SAG card. I was a child actor. So I thought I was just gonna come in and just get it. I'm like, y'all jokers at Stanford, you can't. So anyway, that was when I first met him, and then I had a lot of respect for him from there. And we were just drawn to each other from there. Sterling, what do you remember?
No, so I remember you giving me a lot of love for the show, and you were so kind and so generous. And I was like, this dude is cool, right? And so we would see each other on campus from time to time. And then we started, like Sonny was dating somebody in a group of friends that I was very close to. And that's when we really got to be close with one another. We wound up doing a play together. Was it senior year or junior year?
I think it was junior year, because senior year I did the Alpha Foo Guard because you didn't do the naked play I had to do. Yeah, but that's a whole nother story. The play, Alpha Foo Guard.
We want details on that. What's
Play about apartheid. The whole show was in my draws basically, and Sterling was supposed to do the show.
Immorality Act. Yeah.
After the Immorality Act, it was a beautiful show, and I'm glad I did it. But Sterling was supposed to do the show, but he got busy. You know, by that time he was acting professionally during his senior year, so he was, you know, in San Francisco doing his show. And so I did the show, but I loved it. It was good. It was my blessing.
You were fantastic in it. And so like we were artists. We were the few Black men who were really interested in pursuing the arts, whether professionally or just as a hobby. And Sonny like has this, he's open. He's always been open since the beginning of knowing him. And even philosophically, he has changed his views on the way in which he experiences life, but he's never been someone who's afraid to share wherever he is in life in that present moment. And so there's something about his soul that I find incredibly attractive, because I consider myself to be kindred in that way. Like I like to share myself with people. And I think that nature kind of brings people to us in a way that makes it a little bit easier. It's like, we're here, we're available, there's nothing to hide. And so maybe we can elicit that from the people that we're in communication with as well. So it's really a soul level coming together, for real.
You said it very well. I like the, are we recording this? I like
It's recording.
But I got to give a shout out to Ali Heilman. Ali Heilman is a friend of ours, and she is an amazing director and writer. And she actually was directing us in a show junior year where it was about South Africa, because her passion was South Africa, apartheid, etc. And I was playing a colored person who was mixed, and I was trying to find my identity. And I was like, black like my mother, black like the continent. and Sterling was playing a black man who was trying to also stand strong. And we found common ground in that show, in the struggle for justice. And I remember thinking, oh, this dude got chops. He's making me get to that next level.
He does indeed.
Stratospheric.
So I have a question for both of you, because theater being a sort of first love in there and going on, and suddenly, so Sonny, right now, because of circumstances, the talk is digital rather than live. I know you were planning to go, or travel with it, and will travel with it.
Yes.
But right now it exists digitally, and I know for you, Sterling, I got the great joy of seeing you on stage several times before, getting to enjoy you on television and on screen. But like theater, you talked, like we were talking before you came on, I don't know if you heard, Sterling, about like the transformational impact of theater and what transformation is. So like, what is, in a digital world, in the film, in the silicone world, that power for transformation, what form does that take? And at a time like this, where we need more than ever to be in a room changing each other through molecules, how do you feel about your work and the work that exists digitally and on film? I'm just curious if that's...
You go first, son. This is your talk. I'll try.
I'll just say this. One thing I do like about this digital age is that people don't have anything else to do. They're kind of stuck. So you have this captive audience, right? But also it's surprisingly engaging. Like right now, I'm literally looking at both of your faces as if we were in the same room, and I'm feeling the love and the energy. Like you should not be afraid of this. I've done a few iterations of my show, as well as some storytelling for kids and school districts in this season. And I found that it's been really, really exciting and still thrilling. It's not the same as smelling, feeling, touching people, but I have to tell this story. I remember when Sterling and I were in our senior year, about to graduate, we were in Little Theater, and there was this ghost light up, and nobody was there. I'd seen Sterling perform on the stage many a time, just tremendous performer. I've always had the utmost respect for him. And in that moment, he just got so tender, and he just put his hands out like this. He said, son, you see this? This right here is the audience, and they are in my hands for just a few minutes. And for those next hour, 2 hours, whatever time I'm on stage, I get the chance to just hold them and tell them a story and take good care of them. That's why I do that. And he became my hero again that day. And that's why he's so successful. And I say that when I'm looking at people on these screens, it's still the same energy. I get to tell you my story. And when I tell you my story, it becomes our story. And we become both stewards of it. And now we can start to transform as we consider the fact that we've been in this thing together, because I cared enough to love you. And all that I'm putting into my craft is out of my love for the craft, but my love for you as well, And I think that still plays online. Sterling?
Yeah, I just ditto. And you have an opportunity to reach an even larger audience, right? You may not have the opportunity to have that call and response that theater elicits, especially with young people. Like when they react, like the student matinees that you do, when the students react and they let you know, like, that works, that didn't work, and they let you know, ooh, you a bad man. Like the oohs and ahs, and like there's nothing like it, because we're used to audiences being so polite so frequently, that when students just come with the real, and like, okay, I'm with, they got that. Let me see if they'll get this next one. And it feeds you in a really lovely way. So that will be missed. But at the same time, you can do 100 student matinees at once. You can have like every local high school within a given school district, instead of just one school, be able to take in this message. So try to see it as an opportunity, especially if someone really inventive can come up with a way to maximize this medium, right? Like it is squares in a box or whatnot, but I know that there's some really creative people. Maybe I'm one of them, and maybe like we know some other people who can digitally really get the most out of it. And then you don't worry about what you don't have. You take advantage of what you do, and you move forward from there.
And strangely, and I haven't been able to follow the chat as much as I want to, because I want to look at both of you so much. But that in certain ways, this forum has allowed a lot more people into conversations that they otherwise may have stayed out of, or may not have listened to in person. So if we can sort of use for me, what I miss is literally the transformation, like the story that isn't us, that sort of like that we learn about us through something that is not us. That and that going to the theater for me is such a beautiful experience. That way of that stepping into someone else's shoes and sort of discovering. You are both. I know we don't have much more time, but you're both fathers, and right now the question I end my interviews with is like, what gives you hope? And I'd love to just hear a little bit of that from both your perspective as artists, which you've already really don't do, but as fathers, when you talk to your children, what gives you hope?
I'll start because I like the way you talk, Sterling. I'm gonna let you close with this.
Come on, man.
I just gotta say, you smart, dude. Hey, let me do the Stanford commencement address. I'm not even ready for that. That's next level. So I was talking to my sons the other day about the Market House. The Market House is a famous landmark here in Fayetteville. They used to sell slaves there. There's a strong campaign to destroy the Market House. And my youngest son, Langston, who's 9 now, speaking of resilience and courage, we're on the radio show, my show, The Crossover on WIDU today. WIDU, Fayetteville, North Carolina, every Friday at noon. And we were on the show and I asked Langston what he thought about the Market House. He said, you know what? I think we should keep the Market House because it reminds us of where we came from. And he said, also, you know, it's a pretty place and I can go take my graduation pictures there if I want to. And I thought, you know what? How great would it be to see a descendant of slaves stand there and talk about, yeah, I graduated. Yeah, I'm going to college, right? On the backs of those who suffered, but also in the faces of those who thought he couldn't do it and never could, or thought he wasn't a human. And so this notion of just defiance and resilience and courage that came from this 9-year-old, I was like, I hadn't thought of it that way, son. So he's teaching me. So I say all that to say, my family's about hustle and about hope. When you watch the talk, you'll see that. So it's all about hard work, but it's also about hoping that this next effort is going to be worth it because somehow it's going to be better for the next generation. And I'm excited. I look at Sterling's kids, I look at my boys, and I see this light in their eyes that can sometimes be scary, right, Sterling? Because they're fearless and they don't understand all the perils, but it's also very exciting because they're going to leap past and beyond some stuff that maybe held me up, you know? So shameless plug, find a friend. When you go to watch the show online, if you go in, you can click and support Fayetteville Urban Ministries Find a Friend program, for which Sterling was actually our keynote speaker. We actually have a new student and youth enrichment center here in Fayetteville. And I thank God for my buddy. I called him the favor and he came down to Fayetteville a couple years ago and he gave the keynote address. We earned enough money to build a whole building for these kids. And so when I talk about hope, I'm about putting your money where your mouth is, put your skin in the game, invest in our young people because they're ready to take it and run with it and do stuff we never thought we could do.
Yes. Sonny Eugene Kelly, everybody. That's who it is. Let me see, hard to follow, but here's the interesting silver lining. You know, in March, we found ourselves in the midst of a quarantine due to a global pandemic because of COVID-19, and it was difficult. And it still is difficult, and things are still going up and whatnot. And I hope people continue to be vigilant and taking care of themselves in the midst of this crisis, right? The silver lining, if there's a silver lining in a pandemic, is that 3 times in a row with Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, people had an opportunity to pay attention in a way in which I don't think they paid attention before, right? Because there was no distraction. There was little entertainment going on. There was very little sporting events for folks to pay attention to. And so I think the world got a chance to see like this thing that we've been talking about for hundreds of years. They got a chance to partake in a way that they hadn't before because there's nothing to distract them, right? And so on the times in which I've gone out and I've protested, I've been uplifted by the coalition of faces that I see out there trumpeting, trumpeting. No, trumpeting.
Yes.
Trumpeting Black Lives Matter, right? It does my heart good to know that everyone recognizes that this is not just a Black problem, it's an American problem. Like it's a problem of the United States and something that we need to address as a collective. there are things that like overwhelm me. Like every white friend that I have is like, what can I do? How can I help? If you need an ear, let me know. And I'm like, I appreciate you. I love you. But like, could you also like give me a break? Because individually, they just think it's them. But collectively, it's like, but I do feel that this particular period of time and the focus that folks have made everyone collectively realize like, oh, you don't have to have a swastika tattooed on your neck or have like your head shaved in order to be participating in a system of systemic and institutional racism. There's so much implicit bias that we all carry with us. And I think this is a moment where we can be awake and conscious of the things that we have been glancing over for a lifetime. Because it's like, well, I'm not the dude with the Confederate flag on my back. I'm like, I'm not saying that you are. I'm saying like, in what ways do you think you have benefited from institutions that were created specifically for you that other people have had to find their way into, that weren't originally intended for their personage, right? So I am encouraged by the attention that this particular moment is getting, and I hope that it turns into a movement because of that.
Wow. I'm not even going to try to top that or speak that, just to say, no, because both of you are so incredibly eloquent and passionate and authentic in that. And just to, I think the only thing I can add is that I think for so many arts organizations in particular, we are doing a certain amount of soul searching about who we are, what we can be, and how, and asking a lot of questions that I don't think we've spent time in before. We've done, a lot. We work in the theater because, or at least I do, because inclusivity is a passion. I don't think you do that. However, the many, many layers of constructs of implicit bias and historical systemic racism that exist within all of our institutions whose cause and mission is so good, but where are we now? It's a great moment. So I also have hope that in the best light we can positively and all together move forward, and that this movement is a marathon forward for all of us, and not there. I think Diane Robertson just said here, this evening is a silver lining that would not have happened without the distraction of COVID. We're in a moment of change, and I will say also this amount of time to be thinking about what our roles as citizens of this nation that we make up, and what we want it to be coming up in an election year, and all of that. There are so many levels in which having artists like you speak not only from stages and screens, but from your hearts to us is such a beautiful thing. And thank you for it. And for your guys' friendship. Honestly, when I learned that the two of you, I was like, how is that possible? That's like too much charm and too much good energy in one place. So I feel really blessed to have had you there. Sonny, the work you are doing here in the Triangle, I know will get amplified far beyond, but I hope, and throughout North Carolina, but bless you for making this your home and doing so much good here. And I can't wait to continue watching you, supporting you, and hopefully working with you as time goes on. And if anyone has not seen the talk, you can see it for free. The beautiful production of Bulldog Ensemble and Street Signs is available to you all, but only until July 10th. So make sure you can go to the PlayMakers website and click on, find the link to it there as well. I'm gonna
come to sonnykelly.com. When we're released from COVID, come to sonnykelly.com. I'll come out, I'll fly out to you. You gotta fly me there, but I'll get there and do it.
I'll come. I can't wait to see it in person.
Oh my God, I hope it gets done everywhere, Sonny, and Sterling. I can't wait to see you back doing everything you do so well, and it's so good to see you, truly.
Thank
Oh
you.
my
Thanks
God.
for coming
I'm
in.
going to let both of you go, which is going to make the audience really sad here, but I'm going to let you guys sign off so I can do my sign off with everyone. So thank you. Thank you. I was going to say I have to figure out my Carol Burnett like sign off thing, but not in the meantime, just huge kisses and thanks and stay well. Oh, so I will just finish. I know it's very anticlimactic when it's just me, but wasn't that a treat? Oh my God. Please make sure to join us in 2 weeks' time from now for our next Virtually Viv guest. Yes, an award-winning actor of stage and screen, also a UNC alum and a dear friend of mine, Billy Crudup. So that will be on July 10th at 7:30, so register for that. Keep your eye out for other fun content because we're playmakers and we are still hard at work making plays. It may look and feel very different this coming season, but we will be bringing you an exciting lineup of theatrical experience that engage us and keep the dialogue going. Finally, before we go, I hope you will consider making a donation to Playmakers in support of the artists and staff who made this evening and all of our work possible. Every gift, big and small, makes a huge difference right now and helps ensure Playmakers can keep bringing you the power of theater in all its forms. If you are able to, that would be wonderful. But wherever you are, please have a wonderful weekend. I can't wait to see you in 2 weeks. Stay well, be safe, and I'm so glad you got to share in this. I'm Vivienne Benesch, and I'm a Playmaker, signing off. Goodbye, everyone.